hey, what in the hell is happening with your face? It looks like a face, which is what it's supposed to look like. If it didn't look like a face, you might want to go to a hypnotist. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. I really don't. How are you? My name is Nick Digilio. This is my YouTube channel, and I do videos a few times a week. Continue to do them and share them on Patreon, which is where you should donate some money. So it's patreon.com/NickDShow, patreon.com/NickDShow. Go there right now, donate $3 a month, 15, 20, whatever you want to donate, as little as $3 a month. It helps out. All of the stuff that I provide, videos and stories and all kinds of stuff, the stuff I do on YouTube, the stuff I do on Patreon, the stuff I do on my podcast, which is separate, all that stuff I do for free, no pay. So donate. Whatever little bit helps. It's really cool to help out. It's cool to not be a dick. So patreon.com/NickDShow. Donate today. Alrighty then. Last night, I went to the Music Box Theater, which is, as I've said many times on these videos, the best theater in the country. We are very, very lucky in Chicago to have that magnificent, old, wonderful palace, movie palace, right in the heart of Chicago, in Lakeview. It's not Wrigleyville because that doesn't exist. Wrigleyville's not a real neighborhood. Anyway, it's in Lakeview. It's on Southport between Irving and Addison in Chicago. And they do amazing stuff. They program amazing movies, first run, new, older ones, shorts, animated stuff. It's all over the map. It's the best theater ever. And the people that are running it know what they're doing and they care about the experience. And last night, they ran one of my favorite movies of all time, one of my very favorite movies of all time, a desert island movie of all time for me. In 35 millimeter, they got a 35 millimeter print of it, a print that's been used a lot of times, which added to the charm of it, because it had the scratches, it had the hairs, it had the sound issues, and the reel change jumpy issues. It was clearly a reel that a lot of people have seen over the many, many years. And that was part of the loveliness of it. But it was on the big screen in the beautiful Music Box Theater in 35 millimeter, and it was a one-night only thing, a one Showtime only thing. And I went last night to see this movie. That's right. All That Jazz, which is one of my favorite movies ever. I think one of the best movies of all time. The best movie that Bob Fosse has ever made, and that's saying a lot considering he's made a lot of great movies. Everything about it, everything surrounding it, the way it's executed, the story, the music, the acting, everything about the movie is perfect. It has the greatest opening 10 minutes in movie history and the greatest closing 10 minutes in movie history. That last 10 minutes is just, forget it. And everything in between, also the greatest. It is one of my favorite movies of all time. I've seen it, I don't even know how many times I've seen it. Honestly, I don't even know how many times I've seen it. And I wanted to bring this up, one, because, again, the Music Box is doing amazing stuff and, you know, programming great older films. And you check out musicbox.com, musicboxtheater.com, musicboxtheater.com for all the great stuff. And last night's screening of All That Jazz was packed. It was, everybody was very enthusiastic about it. There were clearly a lot of people in the theater. I'm really old. I'm really starting to feel old now, though, when I go to like revival movies, because there are so many people in there in their 20s, and God bless them because they're going out to see these movies. But like I overhear conversations where they really don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And kind of have no clue about the movie that they're seeing or anything like that. But that's great because they're there and they're seeing it and they'll learn. But like listening to conversations, I'm just like, man, 20-somethings are fucking stupid. They're so, like, my favorite was when I went to the 70 millimeter film festival a couple of weeks ago. I went to go see 2001: A Space Odyssey in 70 millimeter, which I've seen, again, another movie I've seen a million times. I've seen it in 70 millimeter, probably, I don't know, 10, 12 times. So I went again to see it because it's 70 millimeter and it's 2001. And afterwards, I was standing underneath the marquee right outside of the Music Box Theater, scrolling through my phone as people do and checking stuff. And I was waiting there, I was hanging out there because the next screening was John Carpenter's Starman in 70 millimeter, and there was no way I was going to miss that. So as I was standing there, I was eavesdropping on a big group of people who were out there, and this group of 20-somethings who had just seen 2001 in 70 millimeter at the Music Box Theater, clearly had never seen it before, and if they have, they've only seen it on video, or they're very 20-something people. And they're having this conversation. I swear to God, one of the 20-somethings said, this is what I overhear in the conversation, and they're very, like, clearly they don't really know the movie, they don't really know, this is like a very new experience for them to see 2001 in 70 millimeter in a theater. And again, God bless them. I mean, they're stupid. They were dumb, but God bless them. So anyway, one of them says to the others, I'll tell you something though, man, that monkey shit made no fucking sense whatsoever. Yes. He actually said that. He said, that monkey shit made no sense whatsoever. And of course, referring to the first section of 2001, which is the Dawn of Man section. And he said, that monkey shit makes no sense whatsoever. So I immediately, like, I start laughing and don't say anything to them, obviously, and they continue with their conversation. But of course, that comes to mind. It's like, okay, I'm old, man, and I'm an old man going, why don't you shut up? You don't know what you're talking about, you dumbass kid, and I'm right. But I mean, I thought it was interesting that he pulled that part out to be incomprehensible. Like that didn't make sense. Like the stuff at the beginning, like everything else makes narrative sense in 2001. Oh yeah, all that other stuff in the movie, I totally understood that. That made complete normal narrative sense. But that shit at the beginning with the monkeys, that made no sense whatsoever. In my opinion, the first part of 2001, the whole Dawn of Man section in 2001, makes the most sense of anything else in the movie. So anyway, that's just like, that's the vibe that I get a lot when I go to the Music Box, is that these 20-somethings who are, again, it's hip to do this now. It's like hip to go to the Music Box and see old movies and stuff like that. And then you're like, yeah, and then you call yourself a cinephile when you're not. And there were a lot of those people. There's a large chunk of people who go to the Music Box and some of these other theaters, to see revivals that think it's like, sort of hip to do that. And that's cool. I don't care what reason people are going. I don't care if you're a dipshit and you're going because you think it's hip and then you talk about it afterwards even though you're talking out of your ass and you don't know what you're talking about. That's really cool because at some point you're not going to be a dipshit anymore and you're going to learn from watching all the movies and you will be like, oh wow, that comment I made about the monkey shit making no sense, that was really stupid. You'll realize that someday. You're an idiot now. You'll realize that someday. And again, you're a moron, but God bless you for coming out and seeing these movies. And there was a section of people I was sitting in front of last night at All That Jazz that were like, how far into this movie did you get before? Well, I fell asleep during this and blah, blah, blah. And they were talking, I'm the biggest All That Jazz fan in the world. And they were like, in their 20s. And again, very excited to be there, but they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. So, I sat next to a couple of guys during the Starman screening. And one guy started talking out of his ass about Brian De Palma. Okay, which is a mistake. If you're sitting, this is a little message to people. If you see me, and you can see, because it's like, oh, look at this guy. He's old and ugly, and he seems grumpy, and he looks like an asshole. So you remember this face. So I sit down next to these guys right before the Starman screening, a few minutes before the Starman screening, and this guy next to me with his friend, the guy next to me starts trashing Brian De Palma, which is a fucking mistake if you're near me. Okay, I just want to say that right now. If you see me, okay, and here's what you do, and if I walk near you or sit near you in a movie theater or something, don't trash Brian De Palma, especially, and I mean especially, if you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Don't do it. Now, if you do know what you're talking about and you understand film and cinema and your opinion, which should be well-backed and constructive and smart, is that you don't think Brian De Palma is a good filmmaker, and there are many smart, educated cinephiles out there who don't like Brian De Palma for various reasons. That he rips off other directors, that he's over the top. I know a lot of people, a lot of educated, smart, people who know their film who don't like Brian De Palma. Now that's fine, that makes sense. But if you're just some schmuck sitting in a theater rattling off how bad Dressed to Kill is when you're sitting next to me, that's a fucking mistake. Yeah, when you start slamming the acting in Carrie and you're sitting next to me, don't. Now, if you're going to make fun of wise guys, okay, I can understand that. If you're going to slam Bonfire of the Vanities, I can see that. But when you start going after the acting in Carrie or talking about how terrible Body Double is, shut up. So anyway, a lot of that happens at the Music Box Theater now because it's a hip, Lakeview kind of young 20-something thing to do. You know what I mean? Hey, we can get a beer at the concession stand and open it in the middle of the movie. We can do that now. Hey, we're in our 20s. It's really hip to go to the Music Box and see old films and then laugh at them inappropriately, like they did during the screening of the 70mm screening of Brainstorm. There was lots of inappropriate laughter during that because it was a bunch of 20-something dipshit hipsters who are going to the music box thinking it's the thing in Lincoln Park to do before you hit the bars in Wrigleyville. You know what I mean? And again, I think it's better than any, that's a better activity than 90% of the shit that you do in Wrigleyville when you're in your 20s. I mean, at least you're going to do something productive and see a good movie, but still keep the dipshit chattering to a goddamn minimum, okay? And I know I sound like a grumpy old man, and I don't give a shit. And then there's another thing about being a grumpy old man is that you don't give a shit. And I don't give a shit. If you're watching this and you're in your 20s and you're a hipster and you're going to the music box, I don't care if you don't like what I'm saying. You're a dipshit. You'll be good. 10 years from now, you'll look back and go, oh my God, I made that monkey comment seriously outside of the music box when I was in my 20s and thought it was hip to do so before I went to a bar in Wrigleyville. I stopped off and saw a 40-year-old, 50-year-old movie. Yeah. So anyway, there was a faction of that in this crowd last night for all that jazz. And I have to kind of put that out of my mind. And I really don't care if I sound elitist and pompous. I fucking don't care at all. If you're going to leave a comment, oh, you're such an asshole, you sound elitist and pompous, you're right, I do, because I am, and I'm right. So anyway, I did have these 20-something dipshits behind me during all that jazz. And it was like, and I will say this, they are well behaved when the movie begins. It's before, my phone keeps slipping. It's before the movie and after the movie. So during the movie, everybody is well behaved in the theater, which is the way it should be, because people do know how to behave when they go to the music box. And at the music box, there is there's no cell phone policy. You'll get your ass kicked out. So you just have to listen to the 20-something clueless sort of dipshit, hipster Wrigleyville wannabes yap before the movie and after the movie. So the experience of watching the movie is not ruined by the faction of young hipster Wrigleyville dipshits who go. So anyway, this was screening last night. And so I bring it up because it goes back to the first time I saw the movie. I wanted to tell this story. Now, we all have movies that we absolutely hate. We all have movies that, just you despise. Everybody has a movie that they hate. And I have millions of them, and I know that you probably have millions of them. And everybody, I think, has one movie in particular that they absolutely despise, that they hate more than any other movie, that it just makes your head explode because you fucking hate it so much. It's a tie. Mine is Natural Born Killers, Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers, which is, I think, the worst movie ever fucking made. Followed closely, very, very closely, by motherfucking Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which is one of the worst movies ever made, led by the most despicable character, the most hateable, unlikable, despicable piece of shit character in the history of movies. Ferris Bueller is the most despicable piece of shit character in the history of cinema. He's worse. He's a more unlikable and hateable character than Ralph Fiennes' character in Schindler's List. Ferris Bueller is a more despicable character than that. So Natural Born Killers and in Ferris Bueller are kind of tied for me, where immediately the hatred, boom. For my dad, who, obviously everybody hates a lot of movies. For my dad, the movie that he hates more than any other movie ever is this. And it's funny because over the years, we've gotten into arguments about it. And I try to tell him why I like it, because he cannot fathom why I like it. He cannot understand why I like it. And it's funny because this kind of fits into me becoming an old man and grumpy and, getting mad at dipshit hipster 20-somethings in Wrigleyville. Now it's like kind of coming full circle because my dad hates all that jazz and cannot fathom why I like it. My dad does not like musicals, first of all. So I'm trying to explain why my dad hates them. He doesn't like musicals so much. He doesn't like jazz. So like the word jazz is like my dad, nope, nope. He can't even be remotely open-minded about jazz. He hears the word jazz, he's like, no, nope. Any kind of like that kind of music, he hates it. He hates it. If we're at a restaurant and the music channel has anything jazzy kind of related, he fucking hates it. He goes nuts. He's not a big musical guy, so the first time I saw this movie was with my dad. The first time I saw all that jazz, and it came out in December of 1979. I was 14 years old, and the first time I saw it with my dad, And then after I saw it, I loved it so much, I went like a bunch of times that same period of time, late 1979 into early and mid 1980. I probably went to the movie theater dozens of times on my own to see all that jazz. Whether it be at the Water Tower Place or the Norwich or a bunch of other theaters. The first time I saw it, though, was with my father, and it was at the Golf Mill Theater. Golf Mill Theater was a theater that was in Niles, there near the mall. Sort of a legendary, very, very popular theater for many years. And big screens, beautiful projection. They had 70 millimeter capability and all that stuff. So my dad and I go and see it. I'm not sure why my dad went with me or why I went with my dad to see it. I don't know the reasons why. Not really sure why. Because at that point I was 14, and by that point, for at least a few years, I was going to movies by myself. From the time I was probably 11 or 12, I would go to movies by myself. I'd get on the train and go downtown, see movies by myself, and blah, blah, blah. So by the time all that jazz came out, and I was in high school, I was 14 years old, I had seen hundreds of movies by myself and just would go. I have no idea why I ended up going with my father to see it. So we go to the Golf Mill, and at this time, you could smoke in the lobby of movie theaters. You couldn't smoke in the actual theater itself, or there was smoking sections in the balcony, but the Golf Mill didn't have balconies. So anyway, we're there. My dad was a smoker at the time, like everybody did. It was the 70s, and every single human being on the planet smoked, and you smoked everywhere. In hospitals, at funerals, above the coffin, flicking ashes on the body. That was just normal in the 70s. There were ashtrays everywhere, in every room, dirty cigarette butts all over the place. Secondhand smoke didn't exist because we all breathed it in, so it wasn't out there long enough to be secondhand smoke. It was just smoke, because when it went into somebody else, if you were a foot away from someone, you were inhaling their smoke. So anyway, my dad was a smoker at the time, so we go see all that jazz. 5 minutes into the movie, because it opens up with this incredible montage sequence of this big cattle call Broadway audition scene where these people are auditioning for this Broadway musical, the director and choreographer of which is played by Roy Scheider. And it's all, the opening scene is all done on Broadway, George Benson's version of On Broadway. And my dad hates that shit. My dad does not like it, doesn't care about George Benson, little jazz guitar stuff, doesn't care about that shit. And hates the song. And Broadway dancers, my dad doesn't like musicals, doesn't like, I'm thinking about it. Why the fuck did my dad take me to see that movie? Why did my dad go to see that movie? Anyway, so he gets up, walks out to the lobby to have a cigarette. Like 5 minutes into the movie, like after the whole, like 10 minutes into the film, after the on, he goes on it. So as the movie goes on, if you don't know what the movie's about, it is an autobiographical movie Bob Fosse wrote basically about himself, in which Roy Scheider plays this director, choreographer, filmmaker, director, Broadway choreographer, named Joe Gideon, who is a womanizer, drinks too much, pops a lot of pills, and is in the middle of editing a movie and making and directing a Broadway musical. And it's him juggling the relationships that he has with his ex-wife, dealing with his daughter, all the women that he fucks, all the drugs that he takes, all the booze that he drinks, and how he mistreats himself, everybody around him, and his body, and how he basically has a death wish. That's what the whole movie is about. It's about this guy who's abusing his body, fucking over all the women in his life, brilliantly talented artist, great director, incredibly, hugely talented dancer and choreographer, but he's fucking up his life by living poorly and mistreating himself and all that stuff. And he's got a death wish, and then ultimately he has a heart attack, and at the end of the movie he fucking dies. And there's a big musical number at the end with Ben Vereen where they do Bye Bye Love, Bye Bye Happiness. They do that whole thing. It's spectacular. It's one of the greatest movies ever made. So anyway, he's got a death wish. That's what it's about. So as the movie progresses, my dad is grumping. He comes back from having a cigarette. He sits down. Another 10 minutes go by. He's like, ugh. Another 10 minutes go by. And you have to understand that this movie is relentlessly about death. Like, it's about this guy. This guy clearly, Joe Gideon, clearly doesn't give a fuck about his body. Fucks over all the women in his life. Besides being a brilliant artist, he's a pretty fucked up human being in every possible way, who's screwed up every relationship he's ever had in his life and everything about it. And my dad was just, they couldn't say, he would get up like every 15 minutes and go out and have a smoke. Like, he literally would get up 10 minutes later, out to the lobby and have a smoke. He'd come back in, grump, for a while, blah, blah. So my dad hates this movie. My dad hates it so much. So the movie ends, and just the grumpy noises he was making when he would come back, just by the fact that he smoked more than a half a pack of cigarettes during the course of the movie by getting up and walking out in the lobby, he didn't make it very subtle that he hated the goddamn movie. So when the movie's over, I of course loved it. I was like, man, that was one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. And we're walking out, and my dad's like, and we walk out, and this is like an inadvertent thing. Now, back in those days, you'd have to wait outside in a line to see a movie. I know that's shocking now, but you would have to wait outside in a line for the next showing to begin so the theater would let you in. You would actually have to walk up to a box office with cash, give them money, and they would physically give you a ticket, and then you would wait in line, or you would wait in line to buy that ticket. It's amazing. So people were waiting online to see the movie. This was like the opening night at the Golf Mill. My dad and I walk out. We're walking out. My dad's been grumpy now for 2 hours and like 15 minutes because of the movie. He's clearly had more nicotine in him than most human beings have had in that 2 hours. My dad is pissed. We walk out. As we're walking out, huge line of people waiting to get into the next showing. My dad goes, Jesus, I could not wait for that guy to die. Says it right in front of a bunch of people who are waiting to see the movie who have not seen it yet. And one guy goes, thanks a lot, asshole, to my dad. My dad's like, oh, sorry, well, the movie's terrible. We walk away, we get in the car, and we drive. So for years now, this movie came out in 1979, and anytime I mention the movie, anytime it comes up, my dad immediately, there's this guttural, he can't control it. It's this uncontrollable, just like, whenever I say all that jazz, that he hates it. And I always remind him, you were an asshole at that movie theater, making a big deal about stomping out to the lobby to have a cigarette every 15 minutes and then ruining the goddamn movie for the people waiting in line. And he doesn't even, my dad's like almost 81. He doesn't remember a lot of shit, but he remembers how much he hates that movie. But yeah, he was, so I reminded him that. So years later, like 2016 or 17, I have my film club. I used to have this thing called the Nick D Film Club. The first Tuesday of every month, I would host a screening of a movie at the Movie Co. Rosemont Theater, which is now an AMC theater. And I host for many years, probably about 7 or 8 years. COVID. So anyway, so I've been hosting, and so one night I host All That Jazz. I talked to Mike Kurz, by the way, who basically produced and helped me put together the screening and would help me host it at the Rosemont Theater. And by the way, Flashback Weekend, Mike and Mia Kurz host it. It's coming up August 5th through the 7th. You should all go. Flashbackweekend.com, get your tickets. So anyway, we decide, Mike and I are like, let's show All That Jazz. We'll get a great digital DCP copy of it on the huge screen. Be fucking fantastic. And I was really excited about it. And at this point, my parents were going to all of my screenings to support me. So I tell my dad, he's like, what's the next movie you're showing? I'm like, All That Jazz. He's like, ugh, because that's his guttural response. And I'm like, well, you don't have to go. Don't worry about it. And he's like, no, we want to go. Because my parents wanted to support. They wanted to come to every single screening. And they did this basically after I got sober in 2015. My parents wanted to support everything that I did so that, maybe I wouldn't go out drinking afterwards. So, and I don't mean to laugh about that, because it's very sincere and it's a wonderful thing that they did, and they're very supportive of my sobriety. And so one of the things that they did was that they would come to every screening that I did, every movie club screening that they did. And it was great, because all the people that came loved my parents. They would love talking to my parents. My dad would tell them jokes. My dad would do the whole thing. Part of the Nick D Film Club experience was meeting Nick D's parents. It became one of the things that you did. You'd get all the popcorn, you'd get your snacks, you'd get some drinks at the bar. You would hear me do an introduction and introduce the movie. You would hear a whole bunch of stuff about the movie. There'd be a Q&A afterwards where I would talk to the audience and all that stuff. And on top of that, you get to see Nick D's parents. So they became superstars. Like at every Nick D Film Club screening, my parents were, one of the draws to come was to meet my parents and have my dad tell you a joke. So he's like, I'm not going to, because they like doing that. And my dad likes it. My dad loves it, by the way, because he's on my podcast every Tuesday telling a joke. Been a part of my radio show when I was on at the Stupid Ass Car Wash. He was on, and he loves it. He loves the attention. He loves telling jokes. He loves people. I don't know. I clearly did not inherit that, because I don't like people. But he loves people. So anyway, so they would come, and he came. My parents came the night I showed All That Jazz. And I told, in the introduction of the movie, I'm like, my dad hates this movie. I told the whole story about him going out and smoking cigarettes and ruining the movie for the people waiting outside. And my dad had not seen the movie, obviously, and this was like 2016 or 2017. So he had not seen the movie since that night in 1979, and he hates it. He hates it. He hates it. He hates it. So we watched the movie, and I remember afterwards, I'm like, Dad, do you still hate it? He's like, yep. And he couldn't go out to smoke, so he had to watch the whole goddamn thing. He hated it, and they gave me a lift afterwards. I jumped in their car afterwards, and they gave me a lift down to when I was working at the car wash. They gave me a lift to work, and my dad was like completely bitching and moaning the whole time about how bad it was. So, but anyway, so I associate all that jazz with a lot of great memories. One of the greatest movies ever made. Seeing it on the big screen on 35 millimeter was magical, as it often is when I go to the music box. And I might be bitching and moaning about the hipster, clueless 20-somethings who are going there, but I'm happy that hipster, clueless 20-somethings are going there. And I don't give a shit if I sound judgmental, because I am, and I've earned it. So fuck off. But anyway, a great movie, an incredible experience, but I wanted to just share that story about how much my dad hates all that jazz. Oh my God, does he hate it. Again, I'll mention it to him. Hey, I'm good. Like, he's like, what are you doing this week? I said, well, Monday night I'm going to go to the music box. They're showing all that jazz in 35. He went, how could you, Anyway. And I'm sure that we all have those movies where you go, ugh. Like if somebody mentions Ferris Bueller to me, I immediately go, ugh, and I want to punch somebody square in the fucking mouth, particularly Matthew Broderick, who, by the way, I like. I just hate him in that movie. Hate the character. So, anyway, all that jazz, amazing. Continue to go to the music box. Even if you're a hipster doofus and you're in your 20s and you think going part of the coolness of living in Wrigleyville is to go to the music box, continue doing it. I mean, keep it down a little bit. Don't diss Brian De Palma when you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And don't talk about the monkey scene in 2001. Just shh. You're stupid. It's okay. You'll be smart one day. So anyway, the Music Box Theater rules. More great stuff coming up there. And as I mentioned, Flashback Weekend, we're doing a live version of my podcast with Esmeralda and I. August 6th in the afternoon. You want to be a part of our live podcast? First one ever. Get your tickets now. Flashbackweekend.com, flashbackweekend.com. August 6th. Okay? Be there for that. All right, Music Box Theater rules. I love you. 35 millimeter. Boom, boom, boom. The movie's great. Don't ask my dad about it, though, because he'll just go, ugh.